Hello and greetings, fellow quitters. Welcome back to Command Q, the podcast for quitters. We're your hosts. I'm John Pelfrey.
And I'm Maari Casey.
And we're back today with another quick quit. This is our series of fun-size episodes to keep you quitting all summer long. Today's episode is something that's a little easier said than done, but we're going to try to handle it anyway. We're going to try to talk through it. The topic is quit doomscrolling. We're going to discuss some strategies for stepping away from sort of that digital negativity and some ways that we can start to live in the present moment. So let's get into it. Do you ever have to stop yourself from absent-mindedly reaching for your phone and just scrolling through things?
Yeah, I do. I think the weird thing is with having a device, it's a fill in the blank for all those like awkward moments where you're like at a stoplight or you're in line at the grocery store or you're waiting for somebody. And I've been trying to be a lot more focused on like in those moments where I'm like waiting to pick up my kids at camp and I'm standing and there's a bunch of parents standing around me who I don't know, like not getting on my phone, but like just making myself like just look around or like talk to somebody. But it is my natural inclination is to now like go to my phone. So I have to like fight it a little bit, which I think is just because that's the world we live in. Our phones are there.
Right. I'm pretty bad about this. I'm pretty guilty of it. I wake up in the morning and check the news feed on my phone and will sit there, and I try not to think of it as doom scrolling and more like figuring out what's going on today.
Okay.
But definitely when there's some negativity in the news, which there seems to be a lot of these days, and especially this past weekend, it was wild. So, I can get caught up in that sometimes, but when I start to feel sort of the anxiety level rising or some frustration or my body gets tense or whatever, I try to pay attention to that and go, okay, let's put that down, or let's just read an article that makes me feel good. And that's when I flip to like reading something about the sports teams that I follow. I'll read something on, Chelsea and the transfer market or the Pittsburgh Steelers and what's going on in the off season or something like that. And I don't consider that doom scrolling so much as I consider that just, it is mindless and whatever, but it's something that I kind of enjoy learning about. And so maybe part of this discussion too is defining what doom scrolling is.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think of doom scrolling? Is it just mindlessly scrolling through your phone, or is it scrolling through your phone and creating more anxiety, or what do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I feel like doom scrolling, I think of like you're scrolling through something that's like robbing you of energy, like not giving any redeeming value. I think scrolling through the news cycle where you're just like terrible thing, or scrolling through like Facebook comments or like all those things where you just kind of start to feel this like languish malaise of like blah, everything's awful. Like that's a terrible way to start the day. And so that to me, or like you're losing track of time, like you're scrolling through, people's comments. You can even doom scroll through your text messages. It's like getting caught into those conversations or those things are not feeding you, but are like dragging you. I think is kind of like my definition of doom scrolling.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think I'm more guilty of the mindless scrolling than I am the sort of like doom scrolling thing. I basically got off of social media years and years ago because it used to cause me so much stress and anxiety. And I still hop on occasionally just to see what's happening with my friends, but I'm more of a lurker than I am an active participant. And it's really just to see, what's going on with my friends that I haven't seen in a long time, and and check in on things. And then I have like Instagram. I follow a bunch of tennis players, and so it's kind of mindless. It's not a stressful activity in that way. So yeah, I think of doom scrolling as like I used to follow some things in pretty low level detail on Twitter and other stuff, and it just gets ugly really quickly. Yeah. And I think we've noticed that, and a lot of people have sort of backed off of social media because of that.
Yeah, I agree. I do feel like it's, well, and it can tend to pull in certain types of people, and I think younger people too can get pulled into that, the drama cycle, and it is. I've been trying to share this with my daughter. It's like if it's not giving you energy, then it's taking energy. There's no neutral. It's one or the other. And I think you and I, as you get older, you realize how valuable your time is, and it's like. Your time, she'll be like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what I did today. And I feel like that a lot of times too. It's like, what did I even get done? It's like, when you realize you look down at that little thing, it's what your screen time was. Like, I'm trying to be more diligent about like paying attention to that number.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, holy hell, I just wasted 2 hours of my day doing stuff on my phone. Like, does my phone really deserve that level of attention and focus in my life? Yeah. And I think it's really important to pay attention to the time you spend and be accountable to it. So it's like, if you choose, like, yeah, that was a good use of my time. That sounds good. But if you realize you're like, have no realization that you spent 2, 3, 5, 10 hours on your phone, then it can be really arresting to like look at that number phone to face and realize how much time you spent.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Just less screen time, measure your screen time. We measure a lot of other things productivity wise in our world. So measuring screen time would probably be a good one. One of the things that I've done too is I'm trying to substitute reading or scrolling or looking at a screen, because that also affects my eyes and other things. And so I'm substituting that with either listening to a book or listening to a podcast, and something that I enjoy. So it kind of fills the same void, but one, I'm not staring at the screen, so I don't have the eye strain and I don't have the blue light and all that stuff to mess with my sleep and everything else. But it also tends to be a little more researched and a little more informative. So, books are obviously more like big picture, farther out looking, less, and you can do fiction, nonfiction, whatever, but it's less of like in the moment, this is what's happening. And so it doesn't tend to get your blood pressure up or my blood pressure up nearly as much. And podcasts are the same way. I tend to listen to podcasts that are funny or that are also funny and informative. So it gives me a little bit of an understanding of what's going on without it being so stressful. So like, the Weekly Show Pod with Jon Stewart would be an example of that and being funny. But I also love Smartless. Those three guys are hilarious and very entertaining. So I like to listen to things like that. Or I'll listen to a book. Right now I'm listening to Super Agency by Reid Hoffman. That's all about AI and the future of AI. But it's not sensationalized. It's a book that is very thoughtful in the way that it explains it. And so I would get the same information if I was doom scrolling through my social media feed and it was talking about the latest AI, update here and the thing over there and then whatever. But I'm not staring at the phone to do it.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I feel like a lot of times our phones, we were just talking about this, our phones become this little state place, and you and I both have kids, and it's like we see that generation too. They have a lot less face-to-face interaction time and ability to talk. And I think, that when we grew up, there was a lot of nothing. Sometimes there was big voids of activity. And so that's when you spent time just staring at a cloud and like letting your brain wander or talking to people or meeting people or whatever. And I do feel like, and I'm totally guilty of this. Like I'll go and pick up my kids at camp and there's a bunch of parents standing around. And so I'll pull up my phone because it kind of creates this buffer of like, I'm with somebody right now, so I don't need to worry about having awkward conversations. But those awkward conversations are important because that's how you meet people and that's how you build community. And, what do you think? Do you think that the ability to do nothing is like slowly slipping through our fingers because of our phones?
Oh, 100%. I think, there is a lost art to being bored. And being bored is very good for your mind. There's been a lot of studies that talk about that, the reset part of it. And also just the learning to be aware of your surroundings and what's happening around you just in this moment, the sounds that you hear and there's a squirrel running over there, whatever it is, just being present in that moment and seeing what's going on is sort of natural and very human. Mm-hmm. And then you touched on sort of the personal impact of this. And I think this is one of the most important pieces for me is, as a society, if all of us are looking at our phones when there's a little bit of a break and we're, in a public place, then we are missing out on a lot of opportunities to meet people, to have positive interactions, just to get a smile, just to say hi to somebody that you haven't seen in a long time. I've even noticed people that I know they know who I am and we know each other, but they'll look at their phone to avoid having a conversation because they just don't want to talk.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on. I tend to like walk the line of introvert, extrovert, but if I see you in public, I'm going to say hi to you and we're going to have like at least 30 seconds of interaction there because it's important to maintain some sort of connection. You never know. But as people, I think we need that. We need that as much as food or oxygen or anything else, as we need that connection. And when it's in person, in real life, it rejuvenates us. And it also helps us to see that our differences aren't as big as we think they are when we're on our phones.
Yeah.
The phone silos us into our own little space, and the algorithms will feed into what we've already read, and it will continue to give us things that will continue to capture our attention more and more and more. And that creates a very individualized view of the world that we live in. Okay. And the less that I talk to you and the less that you talk to me, the less that the harder it is for us to come to an understanding about who we are as human beings. Mm-hmm. And then that creates all this anxiety and stress and everything else. And then it just feeds this doom cycle where we all hate each other for some stupid reason because I bought the wrong color shoes and you like blue shoes and I like green shoes or whatever it is. It's the silly stuff, but it's like we should just be able to, be out in public and be like, hey, nice shoes. That's cool. I wouldn't buy them, but you know.
It's really true, though. I mean, the phone, we've become socially lazy. The phone is this like safe place to hide behind because even 30 seconds of interaction, it's like you're on the risk of saying something stupid or like forgetting your name, maybe. And it's like we become so comfortable in our own little universes that our phones enable that like hiding. And I do feel like that's really sad, because we need to be challenged. We need to like make mistakes. All those things that just day-to-day interactions cause are really important. But because it's easier, because I'm getting easier like dopamine hits and excitement and happy vibes by like scrolling on my phone, and it's a safe place I'm never going to fail. Then I'm not challenged at all to put myself out there into a place where there might be an awkward interaction or I might make a mistake. And so it's unfortunate that, we all, there's that Lord Hamilton quote that's like, we're creatures, we're all 80% water. So we follow the path of least resistance, which is like hiding behind our phone screens. And so the more you can realize like that's causing you to, fail with communication, with connectivity and all that kind of stuff, the more you can like turn it off and just like prepare to make mistakes, be awkward, meet people. I think that's so important right now.
Yeah, and that willingness to be awkward too, I think is a really, really big one. I'm bad at remembering people's names. I should be better. I've tried to work on it at many different times in my life, and sometimes I know the person, but I just can't put it together. But I have gotten really good at walking up and saying, "Hey, I forgot your name.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but I know that we know each other, and it won't click for me." And I'll just like come out with it straight ahead, and they're like, "Oh, John, you know me. I'm so and so," and I'm just like, yes, I know you, and I'm sorry, but
yeah,
but for some reason it just doesn't click. And then that will kick into the conversation. And so just being willing to just say like, hey, I know you, but you don't have to avoid talking to people just because you can't remember their name or because you can't remember their kids' names or whatever it is. You can still have a good human interaction. And in fact, I think it makes it a more real interaction if we're willing to admit those things. And, for me, growing up as the son of a minister, there were a lot of people that walk up to me on a Sunday morning and they would know me and who I was. And I had no clue what their name was or who they were, some little old lady or whatever. And I'm 10 years old and I'm like, yes, ma'am. Yes. And so I've actually gotten really good at faking that ability to be like, oh yeah, I remember you, buddy, from, but you just got to be willing to put yourself out there and don't miss out on those opportunities for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, and I think that those opportunities, you just never know where, if you're really living in the space between the moments and not living there with your phone, like where those moments take you, whether it's media person or just like, coming up with ideas. Like you and I both kind of come from a creative background. I spent so much time by myself, just like doodling on a paper or writing a poem or staring at something. And it's like, if I had had a phone, I think about this with my daughter and my son too, is like, if I had had a phone when I was their age and even through high school, I don't know if I wouldn't have allowed that much time in my life or my brain to be able to just find those creative things that were just, hiding up here because I would have filled it with something to entertain me. And so I do think that that's something that we're missing out on is like where those boredom and those quiet moments will lead us when we allow them to like just take hold of us. And I think it's still really hard. It's hard for me to do now, but I think the phones and scrolling and that kind of stuff is the way that we like subdue those.
Yeah, absolutely. It is interesting because being younger and being bored, I would constantly have new things I was learning all the time, or I was dribbling a basketball for no good reason in the
making diagrams out of cinder blocks. Like
yeah, I'm bored, and so I go pick up a ball, whatever it is, and I'm throwing it, I'm hitting it, I'm bouncing it, and whatever. And then, okay, I'm tired of that. Well, then I would go I'd read or no, I never read. I'm not. Made me sound like I did.
No, that
play with my baseball cards, whatever it was as a kid. You would just go do those things. And one of the things that I try to challenge myself with, and the reason why I have these guitars hanging on my wall behind me, is when I get stuck or I have the desire to pick up the phone or whatever, I try to remind myself like, hey, pick up the guitar for 5 minutes and just play it. You're going to feel better doing that than you are, reading another terrible article about what's going on in the world or whatever. And so, having it there, and that would be another thing that I would sort of like recommend to people is When my guitars were in their cases, I never touched them.
Mhm.
So, whatever it is that you do, that is another thing. If it's drawing, if it's writing, if it's playing a musical instrument or whatever, put it out and make it just as easy to get as your phone.
Mhm.
And then that way you can start a habit of reaching for that other thing than your phone. But the minute you put it in a box or you put it away or you put it, then it's a process that you have to get out. So like if you're a painter and you have to get out all your paints and then get your brushes and then go get your water and then set up the canvas and do all the things, like you're never going to do it. It's going to take you 45 minutes to get set up. And then you're like, okay, now I'm ready to paint. And then something else has happened. But if you have a sketch pad, then you can just go do that.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. So make that stuff like really easy, really accessible. Whatever your hobby is, whatever it is that you'd love to do, leave it lying around your house like it's your phone. I mean, I think one of the reasons why we pick up our phone is because it's just always there with us. It's in our pocket, right? It's like I won't even leave a room in my house without it on, which is really, really bad. And I again try to be better about that sort of stuff, but it's always with me. Probably the only thing that's always with me, other than maybe my glasses and the clothes that I'm wearing, for that day. I think I have my phone on me more than I wear my glasses. So
I can't. I'm the same. I would like to try to get better at not the dependency that I have on my device for sure.
yeah, and so maybe that's another thing we could think about too, is to have a designated place that the phone goes, and that's maybe if you move floors in your house, if you have a multi-floor house, then you could take your phone to the different floor, but it goes to a spot if you don't want to be that far away. But maybe the phone just goes in a place in your house and then that's where it goes. And then when you walk by, sure, pick it up and see if anybody's called you or left you a message. And if not, put it right back down and then go back to doing what you were doing before. Don't do what I do, which is leave it in my pocket. I feel naked when it's not with me. I feel it's like,
the phantom.
I love it. I hug it.
Well, that brings up one of our last questions is, so when we're in the place where, and I think you and I are similar, where it's like, we don't want to be as dependent. Like, how do you put together like some kind of a digital detox so you can quit scrolling or reduce scrolling, or at least like it's something you probably have to pay attention to quarterly and like, it's like going to the doctor, you got time to do a digital detox. And we try to do this as a family, but what are your thoughts on how we can detox from that just doom scroll vibe?
Yeah, I mean, I think my first one would be just have a place in your house to put it and then set it down in that spot. And then it's just not with you all the time and you get used to it not being with you. The days that I do that, the days actually go by faster and I notice it less. Another one would be if you really want to do I know that you and your family do like a no screen Sunday. So you take one day a week and don't do anything. I think that's a good one. I would love to say that I could go on vacation and put my phone down for a week and never touch it, but I don't think that's possible because even when I'm on vacation, I'm, looking up where are we going to eat tonight for dinner.
Right. Yeah.
All that. So I think that's a little unrealistic unless you're going on like a silent, retreat where you don't talk and you're out in the wilderness and, far away from people. But I would say like the little things, like don't put it next to your bed when you go to bed, unless you're tracking your sleep, which is, another one of our quick, things. Just don't touch it first thing in the morning. Put it in a particular spot in your house. And also see if you can go on a walk without your phone. This is something that my wife does a lot. And she catches some flack from people for like, if you don't have your phone on you, what happens if something happens and, it's not safe or whatever. But if you go in the middle of the day and there are people around and you're in a public place, that's another one. She loves it. She will leave the phone in the car and then go on a walk for 45 minutes or an hour and then come back. And that's another way to sort of like detox in a little tiny, tiny way. And then that allows her to be in nature and actually, like not bugged every time something buzzes.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. I think what's funny is you think about it too. Like we lived in phones haven't been around forever. Like we were existing. I mean, we would go to the mall all day with $5 and a quarter to get home. And nobody was like, well, what happens if something happens and they run out of quarters and they can't get a hold of you, or there's a storm coming and they don't know, or there's like some hot news that just happened and they don't have access. It's like we survived a long time without having complete connectivity 24/7. So I do feel like it's like we tend to. I think I know I use that as an excuse, and as a like we should send you with a wearable or a phone so we know that you're safe. We can track you, but I also just think that it's better I think it's also good for us, like what you're saying your wife is doing is like making intentional decisions to turn it off and opt out of it, even if it's like once a day, once a year, once a week, because we're still in control over it versus like just mindlessly letting it infiltrate every moment of our life. And you have to be really, so we have kids who have devices and iPads and things. You have to make a decision as a family and be really like, this is what we're doing. And everybody has to pay attention to it because it is hard. Like once you say no phones on the couch and then like one day goes by and the next day everyone's like, I'm just checking my email. And it's like, oh, I just have a quick response to a friend. And then all of a sudden everybody's on their phones. So it's one of those things that everybody has to be on board. I'm going to try when we're on vacation, we're going to have a couple days where it's going to be no devices, but it is like everything we use. We don't have, AAA triptychs anymore. And everything we use is on our phone to find restaurants and GPS and music. And so it's really, really hard to completely opt out of it, but you can. Like that's the thing is like, you can go back to using a CD or whatever. I mean, some of these rental cars have CD players. You just have to think about it a little bit.
Wow. Got to break out my like ninth copy of
Walkman
or something. And yeah. Wow. That's, I think you're right there. One of the things that you touched on a little bit too is kids and devices and this feeling as parents, now that we have this ability to track them, we feel like it's a necessity to track them.
Yeah.
But I grew up basically a feral child. I was a latchkey kid. I'd come home, ride the bus, or somebody would drop me off. I would have my key. I would go in the house. My parents wouldn't get home from work for another couple of hours. I would, make a bowl of cereal and sit down and watch cartoons in the afternoon or whatever it was. But I did it by myself or with my brother. And we were fun. And they would get home and it was like that every single day for most of my childhood. And there was, I didn't have to call my parents as soon as I got home and call them at work and say, Mom and Dad, I made it home safely, or none of that stuff. The assumption was just like, it's fine. It's okay.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think the temptation to like make it overly safe for our kids when in fact, sometimes a little bit of independence and a little bit of responsibility, a little bit of, of that stuff helps to create a stronger person and a person who actually is more aware of their surroundings and has more confidence in themselves when they go to leave and do things. And so I'm getting ready to send my son off to college and I'm not really worried at all about his ability to be independent because we've let him be independent in a lot of different ways, because I think that's really, really important. So just because we have a device and we can tether our children to it doesn't mean that we have to do it all the time.
Yeah. Well, and you also mentioned something that's really important too, is that when we're on our devices, we're not as aware and it makes a little bit, not dull is not the right word, but it makes we're relying so much on it. So it's like, I mean, I doubt our kids, or probably anyone under 30 knows how to use a map and navigate someplace. Or like, what do you do if you can't use your cell phone? How do you connect to somebody? Okay, well, what if you need to find a restaurant? I would ask for recommendations from somebody nearby. Like,
sure.
Part of like figuring out how to live independently is to live independently, meaning like without all that connectivity to things. And we're so reliant on GPSs, text messages. I can quick and Google everything. What's the weather going to be like? I don't need to worry about it because I have the app that's going to tell me when there's a rainstorm coming. But it's like, if we can learn to not be so dependent, then I think we can get out here, go to college and like live independently. But I think that's the tough thing is we haven't, at least that this generation, the generation under 30, they haven't really had to live without a device. And so much of those life skills of, getting caught in a rainstorm or like, okay, now you need to figure out how to get home because the bus didn't come or whatever. I think that a lot of them don't have those tools because they haven't had to yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And learning to read a map and use a compass. I mean, I don't care if you have GPS or not, you should know how to do it. Just, to be able to navigate by the sun and know that the sun comes up in the east and sets in the west, like some really, really basic things. And it's not just for the survival skills side of it. I think for me, it's more of the confidence in knowing that I can get where I need to go if I lose my phone or I don't have my phone or there's less access. This ability to just know that I can get home or I can get to a place that's safe. I can get out of the rainstorm. I can,
You're self-reliant.
And little bits of self-reliance, especially with kids, is super important to building their confidence. But I also think it's important to adults, for us as adults too, to recognize that when we are too dependent on the device to give us basic information and knowledge, then maybe it does create a doom cycle loop where we get so, emotionally attached and tied to the thing that it does all this other stuff. So I guess it's really, really hard, and it's not an easy, there's no easy solution here, but it has crept into our lives slowly over the last 30 years. It's become this thing that now, I mean, it does so much for us.
Right.
And with the inclusion of AI in these devices now, and the ability for me to not have to remember anything because the entire world's knowledge is a fingertip away,
right,
for all of human history. It's kind of insane. But what's really sad is that I don't even know my son's phone number in my head.
Yeah, I remember I used to know everybody's phone number. That's the funny thing is like we don't have to know this stuff, but it kind of reminds me of that, like remember that show Little Shop of Horrors where it's like feed me Seymour.
Yeah.
I feel a little bit just like I'm just waiting to be fed. I'm waiting to get more information. And I do think that's part of the doom scrolling thing is like we are getting these dopamine hits. We're receiving. And the phone's not asking us to give anything other than maybe our email address and that kind of stuff. $9.99 a month. So I do feel like it is this like kind of self-perpetuating thing of constantly getting. And it's not always healthy. It's not healthy to do for everything.
No, not at all. So one last question here, and I think this is an interesting one to end on. Do you think that dumb phones will make a comeback in the future?
Sure.
I know some people that actually use them now, or the flip phones have become popular with younger people. I've heard that. I haven't seen it, but I've heard that that's a thing. I read it on my Apple News when I was doom scrolling one morning.
I kind of feel like yes for the younger generation, because like my daughter has a smartphone. She doesn't have any social media. She doesn't really use any apps. She uses basically text messaging, which is a doom scroll into itself. Text messaging and phone. And I was like, she can just have a dumb phone. She doesn't need that. And I do feel like as parents realize the dangers of smartphones and how much it puts our kids in some pretty dangerous places mentally and sometimes even physically, that I think that'll become the new entry phone is these basic flip phones. And I think it's harder when you start getting into a situation where you need email and, you're working, and it would be, I think, hard for that generation to go once you kind of get into working. But I think the younger generation, that might be the new first phone is a dumb phone.
Sure. Yeah.
We should figure out a different name for it though. I don't like dumb phone.
Dumb phone sounds shorter. Yeah. But so here's the thought. This is a crazy one, but what if return to office also meant dumb phones? Would people be more likely to return to office knowing that they wouldn't be expected to have a smartphone for work? Maybe
we should add that.
I don't know. It's an interesting thought. I mean, when I first started in the working world so long ago now that it seems crazy, I didn't have access to our company's internal network to be able to check my email or to do any work related thing unless I was in the office.
Yeah.
That was like in the dark ages of 2001. That was the only way to get work done was to be in the office, physically in the office. But then the deal was like I had a desktop machine, not a laptop, like one that, I'd have to take the CRT and everything home if I wanted to work. So when I left the office at 5 or 6 o'clock, I was done with work. Work was over for me. So I don't know, that could be a whole other topic or a whole other conversation, but like, would it entice me to go back to the office if I knew that like
I couldn't be reached outside of office time?
Yeah.
Maybe.
And that there's some food for thought for all the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. I'm just throwing it out there. Yeah. All right. Whoa. This was a really entertaining one. I feel like we could just talk about, digital life and what it's done to us and how horrible it is or how great it is. We talked about the bad side of it. There's a lot of really good stuff too. And maybe we need to have a conversation about all the amazing things that a phone does for us and technology in general has done for us and something about, productivity and AI and all of that stuff. But for today, we were just talking about, doom scrolling and the effects of the phone on us. So that's it for today. And thanks to everybody for listening. If this episode gave you any ideas on some more topics for our Quick Quit series, we'd love to hear from you. You can go to commandqpodcast.com and send us a little note through there to give us some new ideas. You can also join our proud community of quitters. You can catch us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube now to go back and listen to some of our older episodes. But until next time, I'm John.
And I'm Maari.
And we're reminding you that quitters can win and winners can quit. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the guest's own and do not necessarily represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Command Q or Uncompany.